Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is episode number 165 of the EdTech Situation Room on February 12th, 2020. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located on the fabulous University of Montana.
Hey, that was weird. I don't know if my connectivity, we froze for just a moment. So I'm glad it came back right as you were handing it off. But I am Wesley Fryer, coming to you from Oklahoma City tonight, where I am the Technology Integration and Innovation Specialist at the Cassidy School. And I am the lone watcher of the dog, the puppy, who is rapidly growing. And I am also looking forward to a midwinter break, which we are fortunate to have. So Friday and Monday are vacation days for us at school. And then we also may have some guests coming up because I think Dr. Neiffer is going to be gallivanting around the planet, as it were, to share his EdTech wisdom. And we've also said, if you want to gather at his feet for 7 sessions, that's pretty much the number one reason thousands are going to NCCE this year. It's pretty much the headline. So my son in Denver said, or in Golden said, they've been getting snow basically every day the last 2 weeks. Is that the weather in Missoula as well?
It's pretty close. It's melting a lot during the day, and actually, I have two nieces that live in Salem, and their birthdays are in March, and so we bring them in February during President's Day weekend to come skiing here. So we're hoping for a little more snow that sticks, so that my delightful nieces can go skiing and snowboarding around the Missoula area. But it's definitely winter-ish here, and frankly, more snow would be better. Not necessarily because I'm a winter guy, but because the more snow there is in February, the less fires there are in August. So that's the differential for us here.
Definitely. Well, what is this thing tonight, Jason? We have a live viewer that's joining us. Welcome. What can they expect to hear? Lots more weather and meteorological analysis, I hope.
Sadly, the weather part of the show is over, but the EdTech Situation Room is a once-a-week podcast where Wes and I talk about education technology through the lens of headlines that are happening across the techosphere. And each week, there is usually a lot of interesting things going on that probably have an interesting educational twist to them. We try to dig through those issues to find out more. So we have a lot of interesting links this week, some interesting stuff going on in Google World, some Chrome OS updates, a lot of interesting security and privacy articles as usual, some interesting information about Windows, media literacy items, and also various Apple news. So Wes, where would you like to start us this evening?
Well, let's begin at the top, and we'll remind folks they can go to edtechsr.com/links if you'd like to take a look at these. I did read a number of articles and watched several videos related to YouTube and Made for Kids and things like that. And then ended up stumbling upon this article, Manage and Restore Your Device Backups in Google Drive. So this is, I guess, something new inside Google that you can, view all of your Google Drive backups in one place. So if you go to drive.google.com, in the bottom left corner, you're going to see storage. And so you can click on that and you'll be able to go to backups. And so the key thing about going to your backups is that they actually expire. And so right now, when I just go to my Google Drive, there's a pop-up window notifying me, hey, backups have moved. You can manage and view them under storage. And so when you go to storage, it lists the amount of space that those things take. And then the article says your backup will remain as long as you use your device. If you don't use your device for 2 weeks, you may see an expiration date below your backup. And so I don't know, it might be Google's way of making sure that you're not leaving backups you don't need in Drive to recover space. Did you know about this? And you have any theory on why Google's doing this? Because it appears for me like everything that's like a zip file. And then there's also like a lot of movies that are in here. Basically anything that's not a regular document. So I've got MP4s, movies, weird extensions, essentially. Keynotes, they're all in that storage area.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me here that I don't know the answer to, although I just looking at my own Google Drive, I think I may know this, is that for a while, and Google Drive's been evolving quite dramatically over the last 2 or 3 years. The product is very competitive with other services that are kind of dedicated to cloud storage, like Dropbox or Box.net. But for a while, there was just Google Drive, the application, and now there's Google Drive. The Google Drive application is gone. It's been replaced by two distinctly different products. The first one is called Backup and Sync, which is like Google Drive, and you download it like you used to be able to do Google Drive as an application on your Mac or PC. And in addition to being a sync folder, right, like a la Dropbox or OneDrive, if you use that on your computer, it would allow you to keep cloud folders, right? So they sync to different devices. You can access them on your phone, etc. And then they also had a backup component that allowed you to back up your computer, or it would back up your desktop, your documents folder. And I just noticed that is now gone on my computer, or I'm sorry, my Google Drive. And I didn't really use it because I keep things, if I want to keep it, I keep it in a cloud storage folder anyways. But I think it also refers to Android backups as well. So if you, for example, I've got a Google-based tablet, I also have a Google-based phone and I know backups are being kept for that because I've been able to restore from them in the past, but it is very new to me, this notion that it will now delete those over time. I think that's interesting. It's probably a good idea to help people manage their cloud storage. I know I have helped out folks that use only free Google Drive storage, which isn't all that much. It's only 15 gigs, I think, for a standard free Google account. I purchase more space, but I know some people have been frustrated occasionally because they get clogged up with backups, and then suddenly there is a ton of backups that are relatively no value, and then your storage gets clogged up. So it's probably good from that standpoint, but it just continues to do the narrative. I do think that Google is working very hard to keep evolving their drive storage product to make it as functional and as kind of smart as possible.
Okay, very good. Would you like to pick up a article there from our Google collection?
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about, we both, I think, had picked articles like this. Essential, which is the
Android co-founder.
Andrew Rubin, the co-founder of Android, created Essential after leaving Google, and we talked about this in the past, but he left under some pretty not great conditions. He'd been accused of several things, and apparently got a big severance package and leaving, and that caused some issues at Google. But Essential was a company that was essentially going to, and was an unintended pun, was essentially going to create a premium Android phone for a relatively modest price. And the Essential PH1, which was the first phone they had released, was a really outstanding Android phone. And it tried to pick up from where Google's phones left off. One of the biggest problems with Google's Android system is that they just don't get updates very fast. And so Google will push out Android updates. They then go to manufacturers, and a lot of manufacturers sit on those updates. And the PH1 phone, which was 2 years old at this point, received not only the update to the latest version of the Android operating system. It started off on version 8, and then it received 9 within a week of its release, and then it received Android 10 the same day that they released Android 10, which was an incredible thing for Android users because we don't get the same kind of update structure on Android as folks that use iPhones get iOS updates. And this is, I know the Essential PH1 phone, which I almost purchased. I had it literally sitting in an Amazon cart within 6 months of its release. It was an outstanding phone, but I feel like this is systematic of a lot of problems with tech companies or startups. They just apparently didn't have enough oomph to stick in it for the long haul. I probably would have been a second generation Essential phone purchaser based on their Android updates, but until I knew they were going to be around for a while, there was no reason for me to jump into that architecture. So sad day for Android, I think, because there was finally a company that was viably releasing Android updates on a regular schedule.
On the good news for thinking about Android, it has been demonstrated by some a co-host of this show that if you want to go just Android for 9 months and then jump back right into the iPhone Fold, it all works well. A friend of mine at work actually is a big Essential fan as well, and I'm sure he's going to be very disappointed to hear that that's not happening. And competition, as we've talked about on the show in multiple contexts, is very valuable for consumers. The fact that the major carriers, have tended to put bloatware and to basically not serve the interest of consumers who would want to just control their device and have the apps that they want, not the ones that other people are going to push. I'm sad to see that. But I think this is probably, a sign of network effects and other things. I mean, it's hard to compete in these markets. And, if the co-founder of Android has trouble, getting another company to go, I mean, it's a pretty tough market out there. So sorry to see that happening. But I think it shows probably the nature of the market and how difficult it is, and how difficult it's going to be for somebody to try. If somebody would try to come in and develop a competitive operating system, pretty challenging. We saw, Amazon, I think, try that, right? Weren't they doing? It was just a fork of Android that they had for a while with the Fire phones?
Android. It was a fork of Android and still exists on tablets, but they had the Fire phone, which was kind of a mix between Android's background, and then they were going to try to survive on their own app store. And because that app store is a fifth of the size of the Google Play Store, it never really took off. But, I think it's still possible. And we've also talked about in the past that Huawei in China, who has been impacted by the U.S.-Chinese trade war, they have also created their own operating system as well. And if Android was ever never available to or stop being available to Huawei, they could fork to that. But they also have, literally 1 billion potential customers in China that could pick that up. They could pick up probably millions, if not tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of customers to support that ecosystem. One other note that's also important: if you go to Russia, if you go to China, their Android is very much alive there, but the Play Store isn't a big deal in either of those two countries. That they have their own Android-based Play Stores that exist on their Android phones, because Android's an open source operating system. They just don't have any Google stuff on them. So, for example, in Russia, I think it's Yandex is how you pronounce their version of Google is Yandex. You can get Yandex Mail and Yandex Search, and they have phones they sell that have a Yandex app store on them that is really focused on Russia. And we've talked about the notion of multiple internets, or maybe end up having kind of silo internets around the world. Android kind of unintentionally assists that, because it provides a sustainable operating system for a phone that can have an other Play Store or other app store stacked on top of it.
Hey, George is saying in the chat she's having a little difficulty getting to the links. I'm not sure what would be going on. Are you able to get to links from our show notes tonight?
I am, but I will say that Google Drive is slow for me tonight, so perhaps there is a
Google connector
issue in the mix.
The translation. A couple more Google-related but YouTube-specific articles and videos. Last week, Jason had a great shout-out to another podcast, which was the EdTech Takeout, which is some wonderful educators from Iowa, including Jonathan Wiley. And they had talked about, I think the title of their show was YouTube is Changing. And so I listened to that actually earlier this week, and that inspired me to do some other reading. And so we put in the show notes, and I'll include in the show notes that we'll publish on the edtechsr.com website, a YouTube help article called How Brand Accounts Work with YouTube. I didn't read this, but in the course of watching these videos and reading, one of the questions we've talked about on the show is like, why are brand accounts now not possible with G Suite for Education domains? You can have that extended, and if you're on an extension, you've got until July. I think it comes down to accountability for accounts and COPA or COPPA, however you want to pronounce it. There's a YouTube help link I put in there called Frequently Asked Questions about Made for Kids. And then a couple videos. I guess I only linked one, but it's called, this is the YouTube creators update from February 7th, new copyright features, updates to our harassment policy, and more. Yesterday evening, I actually went through the 891 videos I have on my YouTube channel and noticed that some of them had automatically been marked made for kids, especially the ones that had some of our children in them who, when they were much younger. For those of you not aware, YouTube got this big fine from the FCC, I think, or FTC or FCC, the U.S. government anyway, and is having to do some things to comply. And so one of these things is that you have to indicate if the desired audience for your video is going to be kids under 13, it has to be labeled that way. And so when you upload to YouTube now, it prompts you have to state that. But you're also supposed to, and I got this confirmed, go through your old videos and indicate which ones have been made for kids. So I, did all the ones that I've created for students that are designed for lessons, and the ones that, like, there's some, even older videos that our kids made about Club Penguin. There's this game called Travians. I think that one was already marked automatically. But also if you have child actors, so if you have young children in there, all of those need to be tagged that way. The thing from the EdTech takeout that seemed to be, most maybe troubling is that in addition to having comments turned off and the monetization is different, which I can't monetize. Actually, at one time I could, but you have to have a certain number of hours in the last year to monetize, in addition to having over 1,000 subscribers, which I do have that. But anyway, the thing that troubled me was these videos can't be evidently added to playlists, but this is something I'm still not clear about. I think that might be if you make your entire channel YouTube saying that it's made for kids. So one of the hosts there on the EdTech takeout was saying they had been able to still add to playlists. So there's still some questions around here, but I would just say in general, I think it's fantastic as an educator for us to have our own YouTube channels, for us to be playing in the sandbox, the digital sandbox as it was, in terms of creating media. I think video is still the pencil of the 21st century. And with all of these things changing, it's good to, be able to have a real direct experience on, what does this mean? And what is, YouTube is such an important platform. I think it is a hugely important platform for us as educators, for schools. But it is important to think about, and of course, adhere to the law and to know, how these things are going to affect, students, not only when we're showing them something in class or assigning something, but also as they go home. And one of the things that came through really strong, I think it was in that creators update, but maybe it was also the articles that I read, is that they say YouTube was never designed for kids under 13 years old. And so that is a very clear thing that YouTube is saying in these helpful support articles, in these videos for creators. And that's something for us to think about in school, because does that mean, for my younger kids, we should be sharing things more on Google Drive if we're a Google school, and then embedding those, because we can certainly do that. You can still make those, public and share those. How do we think about YouTube? It is great, I think, that, commenting in some of those issues, because we've used like Quiet YouTube and Safe YouTube and some of these other tools that will just strip out all of the distractions and let you just show the video. And then even with a share link, my wife, does a lot of those as well. You run into the issue though, if that, company that you're basically, they're showing the YouTube video kind of through their own website, blocking everything else. And if they go away, do you have the original video? There's these different kinds of issues. So that was a lot. Any thoughts, Jason? Do you have any YouTube accounts you need to go through and make sure they are marked? Have you been recording a lot of interviews with young Missoulians lately that you need to?
No, I have not. And in fact, I just went to my YouTube account because I was going to check, because I hadn't checked that for myself. And I probably have, I have like 10 random videos on my YouTube account. I'm not this podcast is the closest I get to being a YouTube broadcaster, because I don't.
This qualifies you. I think. Yeah,
Oh, well, yeah.
definitely.
I am a YouTube broadcaster via this podcast, but in my personal account, I'm not.
Yeah.
And I've had some random videos there, and I had a couple of failed Google Teacher Academy videos, and then I did see a couple of screencasts from like 2008 that, by the way, are just really not very well done, but they were intended for students. But I just noticed that it had set my I had never done this, but it set my setting to that I do not upload videos for kids. It's interesting though, because and as a lot of people commented on this, the line is a little hazy because, to be frank, a lot of videos that would be aimed at an older set of teenagers, for example, which are not 13. And well, it's technically not 13. It is very technically 13 as a teenager, but for the high school set would be 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, that it'd be hard to draw that line, right, between those two pieces.
Well, and they make clear in this that, if kids under 13 see it, that's not a reason to have to say made for kids. It really comes down to audience. And, there are egregious cases of people, trying to game the system. And there's a lot of stuff that I think is probably going to be shut down, certainly not monetizable in the way it has been in the past. And so, that overall, like, they're not taking aim at teachers, but these do have impacts for us. I don't think there's any need to panic about, getting a $40,000 fine or whatever the maximum, fine for this is. I just think we all need to have a good faith effort at trying to mark these things, realizing there are algorithms and human reviewers that are also going in to try to mark things that do appear to be targeted as far as an audience that's intended as less than 13. And so anyway, these are important issues. And like I said, I've been wondering, gosh, why take away the branded accounts for schools? Because for us at our school, we have a number of channels that we've set up kind of like this, right? The EdTech Situation Room is a branded channel. And that means that either, Jason and I are both managers of it. We can log in, we can make a change to the account. I think that it has to do more with accountability for Google for Education, and then just really, seeing the branded account as something that is, something that's going to be done outside the auspices of, education, schools, and what we're doing for the classroom. But for instance, for our athletics, for our communications department, we've had some shared branded channels, and what we're having to do is move that content. And in fact, this is a good reminder, and this is why, whether it's internet safety and screen time or all these things we need to be reminded of. We've heard them before, but it's good to be reminded. I need to follow up with some of our team to make sure that those plans are underway, because as a school G Suite account, you basically now just get one YouTube channel for each email address. And so what we're understanding we need to do, if we don't want, and which you wouldn't, right, for your communications department, for that channel to be associated with an employee's email account, because that employee is not going to be there forever. Right. Set up an email account in G Suite that is communications at your domain, and then that becomes the YouTube channel. And similarly for athletics or whatever. So, in that way, you do you can share the password and the access to that. I do think it's important to be wary of those things, and still two-step verification. It's very, very important to have that enabled.
Well, and echoing that piece of advice, I've been to some IT conferences and talked with other Google admins that recommended that all of the really powerful things you can do as an administrator in your Google domain should be limited to not people, but accounts that are basically titles. So in the case of my job at Montana Digital Academy, assistant director at montanadigitalacademy.org, right? And then and we've set this up, and then that's under a very secure password. It's not part of your daily use. You have to log into it separately to get access to all the admin panels. I could see doing the same thing in regards to like a communications account, right? Communications director at yourdomain.com. And that would offer an opportunity for that to be a position as opposed to a person. And then, when you have a new communications director, then that just gets handed on to that person as part of that process. And I think that strategically people are doing that anyways in regards to managing Google domains. That just adds another element to it.
And if you've got a lot of videos, it'll take a while, but you'll have to download all those and then re-upload them. Of course, that breaks the links. So any embeds or hyperlinks that you've got to any of those videos. So it is a disruption. But the alternative is, if it's a branded account, it's going to disappear, I think, after July 11th. I think mid-July was the extension date. Peggy George was asking in the chat, like for Classroom 2.0 Live, which is a wonderful professional development channel and live webinar series that is now been discontinued. They're safe for kids. Do they need to mark them as made for kids? No, you do not, unless your content has child actors and it's specifically targeted at kids under 13. You don't need to. If kids otherwise see this and it's safe or whatever, that's fine. But it's really to I don't know how much of this, but Peppa Pig. I mean, there's these different things that people search for, because that once it's designated made for kids. This was something they brought out in the EdTech Takeout podcast. It's not available in Google search. Like, people can't just search for you if you have or for that video, if it's marked made for kids, which is kind of bizarre. So, I mean, people can get to it from a direct link and embed or whatever, but it's not going to evidently, just show up in an algorithm. And this has to do with data tracking. So the ways in which Google is tracking users and then using the recommendation engine, I think for the FCC's, fine and their compliance with COPA, they are having to demonstrate that they're taking all the videos that have a designated audience of kids under 13, and they are putting them basically in another digital basket. And that's what this restriction profile does.
Okay, Wes, I'd like to point out one other quick Google article, and then we can move on to other stuff. And then if we get time, I've got some interesting Chrome OS updates. But Chrome Unbox reported, I believe it was today, that they have spotted an interesting reference in the Chromium commit list, which is the development of the Chrome browser starts as the Chromium browser. Chromium, of course, backs not only Google Chrome, but alternatives like the Brave browser, the new Edge browser from Microsoft is also Chromium based. But I had pointed this out that when this was first released on the Pixel phones, but there is a great new feature on newer Google phones. That's not Android phones, but Google phones, that has live transcription. And I think I've demonstrated this here in the past, but this is live transcription in action for those that are watching this via video, and it's just listening to me talk. And Wes, you talk for a moment.
I just am amazed to see Android and the power of Google unleashed on the EdTech Situation Room.
There you go. And it does a pretty good job. It's fairly accurate, and it does a decent job of putting things into sentences and turning it into paragraphs. Well, that feature is pretty incredible and pretty powerful, but it apparently is going to be something that will eventually appear on the general Chrome browser, which I think is an extraordinary accessibility feature for those that are in need of having an automated transcription. Obviously, there are laws in place to make sure that all content in various channels, including most educational institutions, is already accessible and has things like transcripts available. But for those that are hard of hearing or have other hearing disabilities and may for other reasons need a transcript of something, the live transcripting feature is awesome and will probably be available at some point in the general Chrome browser.
Well, I want to do some Apple news, but let's first get a quick media literacy. And this is a little segue, because the Google technology you're mentioning is some technology we've certainly, been in awe of and excited about with Google I/O and those. Because does that come up, by the way, here in a little bit? When does Google I/O happen?
May?
We'll have to Google it. So that's the developer conference for Google. But at the last Google I/O, I think it was, we had this amazing demonstration of this phone attendant and AI technology where, a restaurant could theoretically, you could have your assistant call a restaurant and book, an appointment, make a reservation, and people didn't know. And so that is exciting, perhaps, for us as consumers. But when you think about that being weaponized at scale for computational propaganda, hey, there's a lot of new Scrabble words for us to utilize. I am quoting a wonderful gentleman named Samuel Woolsey, and I put this link under media literacy. I just listened to this podcast today. The podcast episode is called Breaking the Truth, a conversation with Samuel Woolsey from January 28th, 2020. It's from a podcast called Power 3.0 podcast, Authoritarian Resurgence, Democratic Resilience. And Woolsey is a professor at UT Austin in their media and journalism department or college. He is the author of a book called The Reality Game, How the Next Wave of Technology Will Break the Truth. And if you are not talking about media literacy and how we are helping not only students, but literally older adults. How are we going to reach older adults? I think the number one demographic that is sharing misinformation, disinformation, and weaponized propaganda. And by weaponized propaganda, I mean an algorithmic. There's algorithmic computational. All of these things mean using code to, create videos, to create articles, to be able to artificially boost the, social media apparent popularity of these things, try to get them into the mainstream, get people to share them, tricking people. I mean, we are living in an unprecedented age of weaponized propaganda, of computational propaganda, where these algorithms are really being used for malicious purposes. And hey, if you didn't know, there's an election going on, and we ain't seen nothing yet. These tools just keep on getting more powerful. So I want to commend that interview with Samuel Woolsey. I think that these topics are essential. I was in a live chat today over lunch with a number of technology leaders at independent schools around the country. And I just, if responses in that webinar are representative, I do not think there are nearly enough conversations happening right now around media literacy and around these issues, just about like, how are you going to validate content? The skills and suggestions that Alan November had, 10 and 20 years ago, maybe some of those still work, but like, you can't look at a website and make that decision. You've got to read laterally. You're going to have to find other sources that, help you, perhaps Wikipedia. There's a really good project that Mike Caulfield has, encouraging schools to, if Wikipedia pages for your local news sites don't exist, you and your students can help create those and provide ways in which people can be vetting these things. There was a great BuzzFeed News article, and I don't know that we had it in here this week, but it was basically highlighting how there are so many, sites today that are purporting to be local news. In some cases, it's even a local newspaper that's shut down and they've taken the name of it, but it is complete, disinformation. So it is a very challenging environment. And I always think it's great to get podcast recommendations like that. And I am fortunate to have a friend now who is feeding me a lot of those, and his name is Brian Turnbaugh, and he's an educator. His Twitter, I'll put it in the show notes, is We Go Twits. But anyway, I met him at the Institute for Digital Literacy in Providence, Rhode Island last summer, and he has continued to feed me a stream of great links that tie into these kinds of issues. So, Jason, are you doing anything on media literacy or the weaponization of news or things touching on that for NCCE?
I am, yeah. I am working with another member of the NCCE team, Morgan Larson, who's a librarian in Eastern Washington, and her and I are going to work on, I believe she's a former English teacher, but she's currently a librarian, and we're going to kind of approach the media literacy topic from kind of two different angles during a presentation. But one of the things that we're both really interested in is that how do we give students tools to better approach things? And it's funny you should mention that from a broader perspective too. I had the opportunity, I sat in on Monday afternoon. The Missoula County Public Schools had a professional development day on Monday, and my partner in crime at the Digital Academy, Mike Agustinelli, and I were invited to sit in on an ed camp Monday afternoon with a number of elementary teachers from a handful of district elementary schools. And I did hear a few teachers of younger students talking about that there, and by younger students I mean middle elementary grades, that at this point they just don't feel like their students are ready to openly Google things. They are moving themselves to try to kind of curate resources, or to borrow kind of Martin Haraji's term from the University of Montana, to orchestrate resources for them, unless there is a kind of a media literacy lesson wrapped into that, right? That this notion, and I keep remembering, I mention this a lot during presentations, but if you picked up a textbook in 1999, 2000, something written during that time period, they would talk about extension activities, and they would talk about, go do internet research on X topic. And not only is that, I think, pedagogically not very defensible, that in 2020, I think it's probably the worst it's ever been in regards to, if you're just flatly buying into whatever the first 50 links are, and let's be honest, you don't get past the first page. If you aren't a seasoned researcher, then you're probably picking up information that's not intended for giving you light, and instead is trying to push your opinion one direction or the other. And if we're not teaching media literacy, we are really kind of hurting the main channel we have in 2020 to pick up and research important topics.
Yeah, these are important things that we need to figure out together. Well, let me hit an Apple article or two, and then we have a lot of stuff in here. So Apple is now allowing for Siri to answer your 2020 election questions. This is Apple Insider from February 11th, and kind of interesting. I know you got another smart speaker. We may want to segue to that, but Siri is really not my go-to as far as like, wow, this is just going to be fantastic. I have the Google Assistant as a button on my homepage, and so especially when I need to look up something on the web, I'm using the Google Assistant on my iPhone. But I thought that was interesting, and seeing what kinds of things the smart assistants can do, and it will. The article talks about being able to not get basically kind of live updates as far as what's going on with primaries and things like that. So that's kind of interesting. But there are a couple articles on it, and you put one from Vox in. I think I put another one up under security. This was also Apple Insider from February 11th. Mac malware outpaced Windows PC threats for the first time in 2019, report says. But before you panic, ditch your Mac, and rush out to buy a Windows PC, please don't do that. They talk about potentially unwanted programs, which are called PUPs. And these malware statistics, which come from the program Malwarebytes, are not just like ransomware and really malicious kinds of malware, but it's also just adware and this these what they're calling these PUPs, potentially unwanted programs. It can be adware that's difficult to be able to remove, things that may be tracking your behavior. They may be affecting your search results. They may be affecting the search engine, right? That's a whole very big red flag litmus test. Whenever I, help a teacher with a computer and he or she does not have, Google, maybe Bing, but usually it's Google as a search engine. It's, why did you have this change? Well, I didn't change that. Oh, really? That means that some kind of extension or other program did. So I think it's interesting that we're seeing Apple highlighted here for having, malware. And that's certainly a headline, because usually Apple, as well as Chrome, Chrome is extremely secure as far as not having, viruses and malware relative to Windows platforms. But it's important to read the fine print there. And I think that headline may also be designed for, getting people to click on it because, oh my gosh, Apple, lots of malware. Well, perhaps, but lots of adware more than other malwares.
Well, and I just would also note that the article that I put in about a similar topic in regards to the increase in, this is from Vox, the Apple's malware problem is getting worse as the headline. The reason why I thought this was interesting is that, I do think that there is an increased problem on the Apple platform, not because there's anything inherently wrong with the Mac OS platform. It's because there are a lot of users, right? The point of malware is to have as big of an impact as possible. And, if you had a tiny a percentage of the market, it would not be nearly as attractive to develop malware towards that market. But I was really interested in that particular article because it talks about strategies for mitigating the malware risk on Macs, and of course the answer isn't antivirus software or other anti-malware software. And in fact, in 2020 and in general, there is sorry about that. My father-in-law making an appearance on the EdTech Situation Room tonight. The point wasn't to download a protection program. The point was you need to be more savvy about how you use your computer, because don't click on emails that have attachments that you're not familiar with, and don't download pups, so which is a term I learned for the first time tonight. Like, you should be more savvy than that. You have to be, in order to prevent this. And we've talked about this too. Windows has changed fairly dramatically. At some point, we got to get our two dogs together on the podcast. But what a cute puppy! A non-dangerous pup is what that pup is. So the point here is not that software is going to protect you. It's that you have to be more savvy about the way you use and approach your computer. And we've talked about this in the past. It used to be that the advice was to download either commercial or free antivirus for your Windows computer. Now, a lot of folks agree that the integrated antivirus and security software in Windows is probably as good or better than most of the commercial products available. But in the end, the best way to avoid malware is to not download malware, right? So to be extremely paranoid is not the right word. Maybe it's savvy, maybe it's secure, maybe it bring a healthy amount of distrust to things you don't know discreetly about. But that has to be strategy number one.
And regularly wipe your devices, whether it is your phone or it is your laptop.
Yep.
We need to have things backed up. We started off the show talking about a Google backup, feature or whatever. We need to be keeping complete backups of all of our devices, and, at a moment's notice, being able to basically wipe them out and reinstall them. Yep. Thankfully, the tools are better at that than ever before. It can take a while as far as how many apps you have and how much data you have, but that's an essential part of hygiene, both in the enterprise and individually. Two other quick Apple articles. So Apple released Swift Playgrounds for Mac. That's from Mac Rumors on February 11th. That's really good news. Folks that have been wanting to use Swift Playgrounds have needed to have a relatively newer iPad. Here a few years ago, we had some folks wanting to do that, and that was before we had done many upgrades. And I think you had to have like an Air 2 at that time to run Swift Playgrounds. And so now it's on Mac OS. We've got a couple, iMac labs. I'm sure it also, has operating system, and in terms of compiling and whatever, there's probably, there's always benefits to having a faster processor and a faster machine. But that is a good thing to see that coming to Mac OS. And then I thought this was interesting. Mac Rumors on February 12th said that Apple Pay could account for 10% of global card transactions by 2025, even rivaling PayPal. But of course, as the article says, this is also pending, what kinds of regulation we have, especially European regulators don't like large companies to dominate markets. And so whether they're going to force Apple to open up their chip, that's being used for those secure transactions, it'll be interesting to track that. Have you been tempted, Jason, to get an Apple card? I would kind of suspect maybe no.
No, because I don't really have much in that ecosystem, and I'm not convinced. Do you have one of those, Wes?
No.
Okay, so I've seen
it doesn't have a number, right? It's just flat. Right. I think. Yeah.
And it's my understanding is that it's not particularly rigorous technology. And I'm not sure what it is. I think I am particularly hard on credit cards, for example. Like I've had credit cards literally fall apart in my wallet before, not from overuse and swiping, but I carry kind of a minimalist wallet with me, so they're kind of packed together. I'm convinced that I think it's a good idea technology-wise, and there's a lot of great security features built into it. It just doesn't seem like it's going to survive my wallet.
Well, on the security note, I know you've got several Chrome OS articles. Chrome OS, great way to stay secure. Right or wrong?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, there is obviously malware for it there are apps in the Google App Store, although they're getting rid of, the Chrome App Store. They're getting rid of Chrome apps. We talked about that in a couple of episodes ago.
But the
same stuff that could be a potential risk on a PC or Mac could also theoretically be a risk on Chrome OS. So in the end, you still got to bring your A game in regards to being safe and savvy.
And be careful of, like, I've got some people that just love honey, right? Oh, I'm saving so much money. All these coupons. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we're being tricked into giving away our information and also installing things that, maybe tracking our data or bringing profit to somebody. So do you guys block any extensions on your network or address? That would be an interesting shout out for anybody as far as like, do you gatekeep extensions or just let it be a free for all?
We don't, because we don't manage any student devices, so that's not been necessary for us. And our statistics suggest that we don't even have kids really logging in on Chromebooks with their MTDA Google accounts. That said, however, I know that I've been to sessions aimed at IT directors that are managing large number of student Chromebooks, and as it turns out, it's not even it's blocking; it's that you're just whitelisting. Like, you allow these 10 of them, and part of that's because there are so many things like kind of sketchy VPN apps that would allow a kid to tunnel through your content filter. Content filters are another discussion you probably don't want to get Wes and I on anytime in the near future. But like, if you're going to have a content filter, allowing for a VPN app, many of the free ones which are really sketchy and security risks, is not a good idea. So that's something that I think you need to be mindful of. Is there are a lot of approved extensions in the Chrome store that are fairly nefarious in intention.
Peggy is saying she does love the honey extension, so it saved her a lot of money. I'm not super versed in it. I just know I see it a lot. My perception of that is it is part of our lovely, surveillance capitalism environment in which, just like CVS and Walgreens are going to love for you to join their frequent saver plan so they can monetize your data, and who knows how much money they are making by being able to have your buying record. And there's folks, who are paying for that. A lot of us are not worried about that. It's fine. But anyway, it's part of the ecosystem in which we live now. So.
Right. Well, and I don't use honey, but I use FakeSpot. FakeSpot's a different intent, but FakeSpot adds in analysis to every Amazon item to talk about whether or not the reviews for that item have been potentially faked, right? So
FakeSpot.
Yeah, FakeSpot. It's a great website. It also has a Chrome extension, and although the intent is different, Honey is trying to get you obviously coupons, but also uses things like affiliate links in order to make money. It's a kind of two-way transaction there, but these things provide utility. Although I think your point's well taken, Wes, that it is part of a larger kind of tracking process.
So with FakeSpot, you run that extension, and then will it just filter out fake or bot, reviews or
it even deals with something much more sinister than that. It actually looks for reviews it suspects are fake, and also will tell you the number of reviews it estimates that Amazon's deleted because they're fake. So it's not particularly great for Amazon branded products. So, for example, if you use any of the Amazon Basics products, and I'll admit I like the Amazon Basics brand. I've got a couple of work shirts that are Amazon Basics. I utilize their batteries. I bought some tech stuff from Amazon Basics. I think it's a good idea, and it's got a good value proposition. But Amazon gives away a ton of those products to get reviews for that in order to kind of tweak the algorithm. But yes, absolutely, it helps you track when it thinks reviews are fake. And it works on Amazon. It also works on, I believe, Yelp, looking for fake reviews. But, like, one of the things I love about shopping online at Amazon is that it does give me access to user reviews. But of course, because user reviews can be easily human engineered, then you have to be cautious about that, right? Like, it's not a guarantee that a review is from someone who's legitimately giving their opinion on something and wasn't otherwise compensated for that.
Part of the media literacy landscape that we live in, it's not just about news, it's also about consumer products and, the ways folks are attempting to influence us and affect our not only perceptions, but our behavior as well.
Well, Wes, We're looking like we're near the top of the hour. I want to go over a couple of quick Chrome OS bits because I apparently turned into the Chrome OS advocate guy. I share these articles kind of in quick succession because I think they're evidence that of actually something that counters an article we talked about a couple of weeks ago where some writers were talking about how Chrome OS is stagnant. I don't think that's the case because I am on Chrome OS on a daily basis. It is 90% of my operating system time is spent on Chrome OS in some way, shape, or form. I think it's evolving in a pretty precipitous rate. But two updates from Chrome Unboxed, my favorite website for all Chrome knows. First, Chrome OS storage management is about to get a big upgrade, and they're going to start to be a little more detailed in the way they show you what you're using your storage on. Right now, Android does a great job. If you go into a relatively recent version of Android, it will tell you what is taking up your storage. Is it downloads? Is it music? Is it video? Is it apps? Right now, Chrome OS doesn't do a very good job of breaking that down into smaller pieces for you so you can make good decisions. And since Chrome OS devices tend to be light on storage, this gives you more tools to deal with that. I think it's a great movement forward. The other thing that's also interesting is that there is a potential and the headline is Chromebooks could be getting this useful MacBook feature soon. If you are, and I'm going to steal a term that you taught me once, Wes, if you are a Jedi with your user interface and you use things like gestures, one of the things you probably know on a Mac is there's a lot of cool things you can do with hot corners and virtual desktops, right? And virtual desktops was new to Chrome OS as of version 78. We're in version 80 right now, but apparently they're going to get hot corners on Chrome OS, which allows you to take your mouse, push it to one of the four corners, and then trigger some kind of action with that. And you're able to then utilize push windows to different corners, and I think it's a great adaptation forward. My point here is not to report these as, interesting tidbits, although they are. It's that I do think the Chrome operating system is slowly and surely becoming a realistic choice for someone who is seeking to be super productive. And again, I have gone all in on Chrome OS. I don't carry around. There was a time when I was a Chrome OS user where I'd carry around a backup PC with me in my bag, which first of all is just ridiculous on face, but I don't need to do that anymore because I can be 100% productive all the time on my Chromebook. And I do a variety of interesting bits to be able to do that. So Chrome OS is, I think, a very much a productive alternative. And then one other quick note here. This is also from Chrome Unboxed. I talked about in the past how I've actually installed Firefox on my Chrome OS devices. I'm not talking about the Android Android Firefox, which is relatively low function. It's the desktop version because on modern Chrome OS devices, you can install Linux-based apps. Well, there is a set of instructions. They look a little daunting. So if you didn't want to do this, I'd understand. But if you've been tempted by the Brave browser, which is built on top of Chromium, right, the base of Chrome, but has a bunch of security features built in, Chrome Unbox has you covered. You can now install the Linux version of the Brave browser on your Chrome OS device. So it's like having your cake and eating it too.
And I think that's a really interesting cutting edge thing to realize. Like at one point, Chrome was so much faster than every other browser. Well, Apple's worked a lot on Safari. They've touted that as being a faster browser. But now we've got, Microsoft Edge, both for Mac OS as well as for Windows, that is Chromium based. And you've talked about it being really, really zippy, Brave. And then there are privacy affordances to these other browsers like Firefox and Safari. So I think, that is interesting and worth checking out. As our resident Apple advocate here, I will point out that on the lovely iPhone, when you go into settings, general iPhone storage, I am, sporting now the 32 gig iPhone 7 that used to be our daughter's, and have for the first time run into storage issues where I've had to delete apps. And I'm now using 31.1 gigs of 32. It's very helpful, though, because it tells me, I can delete large attachments, how much I've got on Photos, Pocket Cast, Facebook Keynote, Interestingly, I think this was over Christmas. I downloaded this game, Best Fiends, which I think my sister uses, but it's taking up 425 megs, and I've never used it. So helpful to have that kind of reporting data, especially when you need to manage storage because you have a limited amount. So generally, when we bought devices, I have purchased larger devices. That is the dog. That's Scarlett's bowl. We have a dog bowl that has disappeared in our house. The dog bowl that belongs to our older dog completely disappeared, and we're sure that our puppy did not eat it. But anyway, I digress because my wife was holding up this bowl going, "What is this?" Well, I don't think we're going to end with more dog bowl discussion. What do we want to end with? Do we want more articles? Or just
sure, I'll just do a quick one because this is kind of related to browsers. Recently, the Mozilla Foundation released a new version of Firefox for Android. And the reason why this is interesting is because it is a large overhaul of this particular platform. And the part for me that makes this so interesting is that you can now install extensions on a mobile browser, which is an extraordinary thing. But the idea here is that you can take extensions, and one we've talked about here on the podcast a couple of different times is uBlock Origin. That's the ad blocker that I believe both Wes and I use as a standard install on our browsers. You can now install that on Firefox on a mobile platform like Android, and that's a really extraordinary development. And I can tell you, as much as I might be annoyed by intrusive advertisements on a laptop screen, it is so much worse on mobile because of the size of the screen. And in fact, one of the things that I find news to be hard to read, this is part of the reason why I pay for so many news services, is because I want something that is generally advertising free, because I can't read it otherwise. If a third of the screen is always covered by some kind of advertisement, it makes the news pretty hard to get through. And so I won't stop paying for news because I think it's important for other reasons. But I will try the new Android version of Firefox because I think that that's something to support, that you can now put extensions on the browser.
Very good. Well, shall we geek of the week it and get out of this? Out of this show?
Let me do mine quickly. I've talked about one of my favorite podcast is Darknet Diaries. It's an excellent podcast. It gives you some sense about kind of what hacking is all about. They talk about both white hat and black hat hackers. And my favorite episode that I believe I mentioned in the past is they talk about a person who was a security researcher and white hat hacker that was supposed to break into a bank in Lebanon and accidentally broke into the bank next door, which is not really the intent there. But there's a recent set of episodes I think are worth your time. It's episode 58. It's called Oxy Monster, and it talks a little bit about the notion of the various marketplaces on the hidden internet, right? So things you access like via the Tor browser, sometimes referred to as the dark web, but it refers to an earlier episode. I recommend listening to that one as well in conjunction with this. But this episode talks a little bit about taking down FBI attempts to take down these marketplaces to buy things like firearms and drugs. And as it turns out, it's a little complex because you're chasing someone on an internet site that is really not traceable. So it really gives you a lot of sense of security, what the internet that's not accessible by most internet users is like. And I highly recommend it. Really well done series, excellent narrative podcast. And to be honest, every episode I've probably heard about a third, maybe all of them now. Incredibly engaging.
Fantastic. I think podcast recommendations as well as book recommendations are one of the best things to be able to get from podcasts. So my geek of the week is a website called Pixel Art, but it's Pixel spelled PIXILART.com. It's that same spelling, PIXIL, but _art on Twitter. The reason I know about this is we have a fantastic student project that's been going on for something like 7 years. And the last 3 years, I've been working with our 12th grade creative writing teacher who teaches this class. Students design and write and create their own children's picture books. And they've been using Book Creator the last 3 years to do those and printing them on demand on Lulu. It's the first year she's required all of them to record their voices. You can go to the website studentauthors.cassidy.org and click on library and go to the 2020 authors. And one of our students who wrote Little Larry and the Jot 400 used pixel art to create all his characters that are inside his book. And so these, look like they're from Minecraft and from games. And so it was either yesterday or the day before. It was yesterday, I guess, on Tuesday. Our 12th graders who had created these books went down to our kindergarten classes and read their books, to the students. And the kids were like, that looks like Minecraft. And anyway, asked, how'd you create that? He said, I made it in pixel art. So it is an app as well as a website, and might be something fun to share with your students. And I definitely think it's awesome to share ebooks, and you can download that ebook as well as others for free that you can read on your device as EPUBs that have embedded student audio, and hear those 12th graders read their own books to students. So we're hoping to do a celebration event in a couple weeks that's going to be kind of a red carpet event. First time to do that, but have this thing in our theater in the evening where our student authors share their books and kids listen. And
that's
my
cool.
favorite part will hopefully be the airdrop station where people can bring their iOS device and, airdrop all the free copies of the books. Take them home. Listen to the student authors read to you.
That's super cool. I love that's going to be a red carpet event too. That's
what we're going for. Yeah, I think that, and that's a shout out to Tim Tyson way back in 2005 when I met him when he's at Cobb County, Georgia at Mabry Middle School. They did that with digital storytelling and just kind of built it up year over year as a bigger and bigger deal. They celebrated the kids who were making these digital stories and making movies and things like that. To quickly give a voice to some chat, Peggy George was asking about ad blockers and how frustrating it is sometimes when sites are saying you got to turn off your ad blocker. I had taught Rachel, our daughter, who's continuing to do debate, and Jason, you'll be excited that she's thinking about debate camp this summer and continuing on with debate, how to use what's called Google cached links. And sometimes when a website, sometimes when it's moved or it's not available, but also it can be if they have a paywall, you can click a little arrow up in the upper right corner and then go to a cached link, which is a saved link. And sometimes that allows you to actually bypass a paywall. And yes, Peggy, you can use that and keep your ad blocker turned on. It doesn't always work. But Marta, who's down in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, is saying, thanks for the pixel art. She's going to check that out. So awesome. Thank you for saying hi, Marta. I've seen we had up to 5 live viewers today, and good to know that you're able to join us tonight. So you can find me on Twitters at wfryer, speedofcreativity.org. I've been posting a little more recently and continuing to post my media literacy and digital literacy curriculum for students at mdtech.cassidy.org. Jason, where are we going to be able to find these this is going to be 7 different. I don't know anybody who's ever done 7 sessions at a conference. So I think
my record.
A Guinness Book of World. Oh, you've
this is not my record. Yeah.
Oh man.
It was foolish, but I think it was NCC 2013 or 14. I did 13 sessions in 4 days.
What?
Yeah, it was
right,
not.
Let's just put a shout out. Has anybody exceeded that? This tells you something about the capacity of this man to generate new content at a tech conference.
Well, and I have to say, I don't think I was even getting paid that year either. So it was just me going to town. So, but it karma, something. So, well, first of all, follow me on Twitter, Tech Savvy Teach. I will tweet out links to stuff as I'm presenting. And by the way, not only am I a part of NCCE in 2 weeks, I guess it will be in 3 weeks. 2 weeks from now, I'll be at the Digital Learning Annual Conference in Austin, Texas, the second annual Digital Learning online annual conference in Austin. And I am presenting on a new topic that is a fresh presentation I've been working on. I'm going to do a smaller version at DLAC and then a larger version at NCCE. It's called Reading Still Matters, Literacy in Digital Learning, and talking about not digital literacy, but reading literacy. And if we are paying enough attention to student reading levels and the reading levels of material. It's a great presentation I'm looking forward to. More about NCCE, though, www.ncce.org. ncc.org. It's not too late to sign up for this awesome conference. We have a great number of wonderful things this year, including a focus on esports. There's going to be a couple of demonstrations regarding esports. We have wonderful keynote speakers, excellent sessions. You can see me 7 times if that's really what your thing is, or meet with a number of excellent vendors at that conference. Again, ncc.org. But this podcast isn't ISTE, NCCE, DLAC, any of the things. This is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once-a-week podcast that meets most Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central, or 3 or 4 UTC if you happen to be doing it live in the middle of the night in Europe. But if you can't catch us live, although please do, we love having a live audience, although I do miss, I don't see any of the chat anymore on my end. So that's
really
participating in chat is I don't see.
Oh, you got to let me know. I will have to maybe I have to knight you again as co-manager of the channel.
Yeah, I'm also not signed into anything either. I think
yeah, you got to sign in to do that.
Yeah, so,
okay.
But we love
Anyway.
our chat room. We love live audience. But if you can't join us, then you can find us on YouTube. You can find us wherever finer podcasts are aggregated, including all the major apps. You can also take a look for us on Stitcher, where we also appear. We're in the iTunes a podcast library. If you can't find us there, don't want to hear us in that format, you can always go see the links, edtechsr.com, full show notes every week, and also the links to every article we also don't get to. In the meantime, we hope you stay safe, stay savvy, and we hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.